What is a family, truly, but the first and most enduring architecture of control we ever encounter? Look past the sentiment, strip away the veneer of unconditional love, and what remains is a crucible where the raw, untempered metals of power, fear, and desire are first forged. Kinship is not a sanctuary. It is the most intimate, inescapable theater of war, where the combatants are granted the master map to every weakness you possess. The psychological gravity of this truth, this inescapable fact that the hands designed to nurture are also the ones best positioned to destroy, is the very foundation of Ahmad's strategic lens, and it demands cold, unflinching observation. We are taught that the bond of blood is inviolable, a safety net woven from ancient loyalty, but the strategist knows that blood is merely the deepest point of entry, the most potent solvent. It is the perfect conduit for the kind of subtle, enduring manipulation that requires years of proximity and observation to perfect. The manipulation within kinship rarely announces itself with a.
Get away from the wall.
It begins with the gentle, almost imperceptible installation of emotional triggers, the precise words, the knowing glances, the shared historical narrative weaponized to ensure compliance or instill guilt. This initial phase is the cultivation of leverage, the slow, strategic accumulation of secrets and vulnerabilities, filed away in the archives of the mind, ready for deployment. Consider the dynamics of expectation, the unspoken contract of duty and obligation. These are not moral imperatives. They are invisible chains of control. When a parent, sibling, or extended relative invokes the concept of family honor or what we deserve, they are engaging in a tactical maneuver, leveraging your intrinsic desire for belonging against your autonomy. They are making their desire your mandate, blurring the lines of individual will until you cannot distinguish their agenda from your own sense of self-worth. It is a psychological masterpiece, often executed without conscious malice, yet devastating in its efficacy. The cold reality, as seen through the strategic eyes of Ahmad, is that power, in its purest form, is the ability to dictate the reality of others, and nowhere is this power more absolute than in home, where identity is first constructed. The emotional depth of kinship ensures that strategic actions taken within its sphere carry exponential weight. A betrayal from a stranger is an event. A betrayal from kin is an existential collapse. This is why the control exerted here is so often predicated on fear. The fear of exclusion, the fear of judgment, the primal terror of being cast out of the one tribe you cannot resign from. Ambition, within the architecture of family, becomes a zero, some game played with phantom rules. Sibling rivalry is merely a proxy war over resources and approval, a training ground for future dominance and deception. The one who appears most selfless, most loyal, most devoted to the collective, often holds the highest position of covert authority, trading perceived martyrdom for irrefutable influence. This person does not ask. They merely sigh, or subtly mention a past sacrifice, or invoke a looming disappointment, and the desired outcome materializes as if by magic. A silent, strategic victory. The true master of this domain does not conquer. They merely manage the atmosphere of obligation until the desired actions are inevitable. We must understand that dominance within this sphere is rarely physical. It is a battle fought in the deep valleys of the subconscious. It is the control over the narrative, the careful curation of historical memory. Who gets to define the past errors? Whose version of events becomes the accepted truth? This control over the family's collective memory is the primary tool of sustained psychological dominance. If you can define the mistakes of the past, you can control the actions of the future. The weak link, the errant child, the difficult cousin, these are titles, not identities, assigned strategically to limit their influence and justify their continued subservience to the controlling entity. The narrative dictates the power structure, and those who dare to challenge the established history are immediately branded as disruptors, traitors, or worse, ungrateful. This is how the system self-preserves, creating a psychological ecosystem where challenging the central authority feels akin to severing your own roots. This level of insight, the meticulous mapping of emotional causality, is the signature of Ahmad's methodology. Desire, when filtered through the restrictive channels of kinship, often manifests as concealed ambition or dark envy. When a kin member achieves success outside the family structure, it is rarely met with pure joy. More often, it is greeted with a strategic blend of pride and quiet resentment. The resentment is born from the fear that this achievement disrupts the established hierarchy. The successful one now possesses new resources, new influence, and, most dangerously, new independence. The subtle, strategic response from the core power structure is to attempt to reintegrate this new resource by making the success conditional upon family participation, or by subtly undermining the new achievement's significance. That promotion is wonderful, but who will now take care of this burden? Or it's a good job, but you know your true value is here with us. This maneuver attempts to co-opt the external victory back into the internal system of control, reminding the ambitious individual that their true worth is still appraised by the tribe, ensuring that the achievement becomes a new kind of liability, rather than a passport to freedom. This intricate dance of pride and possessiveness reveals the true, dark undercurrent of kinship. It often seeks to elevate itself by minimizing the individual, not celebrating them. The most potent form of deception within kinship is self-deception. We, the subjects, actively participate in our own manipulation because the alternative, acknowledging that the people who promised to love us unconditionally are actually leveraging our vulnerabilities, is too terrifying to bear. We rationalize the cruelties, we minimize the manipulations, we rename the control as care. This psychological protective mechanism is what gives the dark architect, the subtle manipulator, their enduring strength. They understand that the target is their own greatest defense, a shield of denial forged from decades of shared history. The architect of this deception, the figure Ahmad observes with clinical detachment, knows the exact dosage of guilt, the precise timing of praise, and the necessary degree of cold withdrawal required to recalibrate behavior. They do not need explicit demands. They need only to manage the emotional temperature of the relationship, allowing the subject's own desperate need for belonging and approval to do the heavy lifting of compliance. This is the strategic utility of shadows within, the truth hidden in plain sight, the power dynamic encoded in the genetics of relationship. It dictates that to master the strategic landscape of the world, one must first survive the labyrinth of their own making. The principles of dominance and submission are learned at the dinner table, long before they are applied in the boardroom or the battlefield. Every complex political maneuvering, every corporate takeover, every diplomatic deception is merely a scaled-up version of the psychological warfare perfected in the intimate, pressurized environment of kin. The fear of disappointing a parent becomes the fear of failing a superior. The competition with a sibling transforms into the cutthroat ambition against a rival. Ahmad asserts that the family is the laboratory where the human psyche is mapped, and the experiments though cloaked in sentiment, are rigorously strategic. To escape the shadow is to recognize the blueprint of control laid down in your earliest years, to see the emotional levers for what they are, not expressions of love, but instruments of leverage. The deepest understanding of human psychology, therefore, begins not with the distant stranger, but with the painful, necessary dissection of the ties that bind and occasionally strangle. The continuous, silent drama of who controls the narrative, who dictates the debt, and who holds the veto power over your future. This is the true, hidden life of kinship, a constant, low-frequency hum of strategic tension, waiting only for the opportune moment to manifest as catastrophic conflict, an act of dark, necessary severing, or worse, a lifetime of willing, unexamined servitude. The emotional intensity is the fog, but the cold, calculating engine beneath it is pure strategy, honed by proximity and the perfect knowledge of your softest parts. The power of emotional dominance is also deeply tied to the strategic deployment of vulnerability itself. The manipulator often presents themselves as the victim, the long, suffering pillar, the one enduring the greatest burden. This performance is designed to achieve two objectives. First, to establish an ethical shield, making any counter-attack against them appear cruel or ungrateful, and second, to load the subject with perpetual, unresolvable debt. The debt is emotional, intangible, yet devastatingly real. Look at what I sacrificed for you. They communicate, not through an aggressive demand, but through the sad slump of a shoulder, the weary gaze across the room. This silence is the most sophisticated form of pressure, forcing the recipient to constantly seek ways to repay an unquantifiable debt that can never truly be settled. This is where the human tendency toward reciprocity is weaponized, creating an endless cycle of giving that only benefits the central controller. The philosophical insight, the hard-won wisdom Ahmad offers, is that in the theater of kinship, those who appear weakest often hold the most unassailable strategic position, for their pain is the currency, and your empathy is the payment required. The true cost of this psychological contract is nothing less than your entire, uncompromised future.